welcome to my channel. I'm so happy that you're here. Today we're going to begin a sew along for the Carolina Herrera inspiration dress that Princess Meghan Markle wore last year to a polo match. And I'm going to be using some gifted Minerva Crafts fabric to make my interpretation of the dress. Now, it's not going to be an exact replica, obviously, but I'm doing my best to come as close as possible to the inspiration look. And I'm glad you're here and following along, and hopefully you can join me and make your own inspiration look from this Carolina Herrera dress. So stick around, make sure you click subscribe or like so you can see when the next video is posted for this sew along. And we're going to begin today with number 1, which is cutting and prepping our pattern. So let's get started. To begin, you're going to want to identify what patterns you would like to use to create your own inspiration look. I chose 2 patterns that I found, one by accident at the thrift store, which is an out-of-print pattern, and the other one which is readily available in the Markle's line. So if these are not available to you, you certainly can look through the other pattern catalogs and see what else is out there. I'm sure there's many options available, but these are the 2 that I'm going to be following in the sew along. So the first pattern that you're going to want to pick up if it's available is Markle's 7745. And for this pattern, we're going to be using View D and the bodice only from View D. And this is going to create that same cross front, like a wrap dress that she is wearing for the inspiration look. And the cap sleeves. Now the sleeves on this dress are a little bit longer than the inspiration dress, so that would be another change if you'd like to alter it. I chose to leave it alone and use the pattern as is for the sleeve portion. And then obviously we're not going to be using the ribbons and making it a true wrap. We are actually going to be crossing it over and sewing it into the dress, into the skirt, so it's not going to open up from the front. We're going to be adding a center back zip to our pattern so that we can get in and out of our dress. But otherwise it's just going to be a faux wrap in the front. I picked this pattern though because I liked the lines of it. I thought it looked similar. It does have a bust dart. It does not have the Dior dart that is in the inspiration dress, but it's close, and so I went with this, and it is readily available for the most part, as far as I know, in the United States anyway, that you can still pick this up. I think it's from last year's spring line or early spring line, or from this year's possibly. I'm sorry, I don't even know. This is the one that took a little bit more digging. I looked for several different skirts that mimicked the features that I thought were most important for the inspiration look. So the things that I was looking for were those princess seams that are running through that skirt, the midi length, the fullness of the skirt, which is kind of, I would guess, a half a circle or a 3/4 circle skirt, and then those welt pockets that are in the front. I feel like those are all key elements to making this look as similar as possible to the inspiration dress. So I happened to be out shopping one day at the thrift store, as I do, and I came across this Simplicity 2996 pattern, which is a threads pattern. And you can see, yes, it is kind of a dated look. I picked it up because I first saw this skirt and I thought, okay, this fullness, this length, this is what I'm going for right here. And then I really sealed the deal when I saw these welt pockets in View A. So I hope you can see that in the camera. But these welt pockets that were right here in this front seam are just like the inspiration dress. So I went ahead and picked this one up, and we will be making modifications to this skirt pattern that I'm going to go ahead and talk about in the cutting part next. So grab whatever patterns you're going to be cutting out. Get those pieces cut out and ready, and let me show you which ones you're going to need if you're following along exactly with me. When I was cutting out my skirt pieces and my bodice pieces, I totally goofed. And the whole purpose of this sew along is to save you time and trouble. So let me be the one that makes the mistakes for you and figures it out along the way and tells you how to not make those mistakes. So the first thing that I did that was a major whoopsie was my bodice back piece. I completely spaced that I needed that back center zip added to view D. So I accidentally cut my piece on the fold, and I had to go back and make an adjustment by cutting it in half and using smaller seam allowances on the side. I would have happily recut the whole piece, but I was out of fabric. So sometimes you just make do with what you have. The other mistake I made was on the skirt. And guess what? Center back zip again. It just kept tricking me. So make sure that if you need to add a center back zipper to your pattern pieces, you either write it down in a note and stick that big post-it note on or something so that you remember. Add those seam allowances and don't cut it on the fold. Make sure it's 2 separate pieces with enough extra seam allowance for that center back zip to be added. So without further ado, I present to you how I cut out the pattern pieces, and I'll put in the little notes of what you need to do to make sure yours is cut out correctly. Okay, today is the day that we are going to cut out our pattern and prepare it. If you are following along with me for this sew along using the same 2 patterns that I am using, I'm going to show you what I did to modify those pattern pieces and which ones you want to cut out in order to make the dress. So for the bodice, we're going to be using the McCall's pattern 7745, and the bodice that I'm looking at is view D. So what you want to do is go ahead and cut out from the pattern your 2 sleeve fronts, 2 sleeve backs, 2 of the front in whatever cup size that you're looking for. And then your back pattern piece is where you need to make a modification. So because the Meghan Markle dress that we're going for, I guess I should say the Carolina Herrera dress that we're going for, has a center back zipper because that front is a faux wrap and it's not going to be able to be unwrapped like it would be in this pattern. We're going to need to add a center back zip. So to do that, I just taped on some scrap paper that I had on my back center seam. Well, it's not really a seam, it's normally cut on the fold. So to add a seam, we're going to tape on an extra piece of paper, and just using a ruler, we're going to mark an additional 5/8 inch on that pattern piece, and then I'm going to cut around it, and that will be my new pattern piece. And I'm going to want to cut 2 back pieces so that I have both sides for the zipper. So that's how you want to cut the bodice. For the skirt, I chose this kind of vintage at this point, Simplicity pattern, Simplicity 2996. And I chose it because it has on there the welt pockets that are in the princess seam that are the same as the inspiration dress. And then it also comes in this midi length, same as the inspiration dress, kind of, I would say, a 3/4 circle skirt or maybe a half circle skirt there. And so that was what I wanted to do with those princess seams going down and with that welt pattern piece. So that is why I picked up this one, but you certainly could pick up a different pattern if you find one that works more to your liking, or you just want to do the welt pockets yourself. When I was reviewing this pattern, what I did not notice is this dropped waist. So I could easily see it in view D here. It stands out quite clearly on the model. But in B and C, it's a little bit more hidden in the fabric choices that they used. And so I was thinking that it came with 2 different bodice lengths and that this skirt pattern piece would be fine the way it was. So here's what happened when I cut it out of the pattern. I figured out here is where the original skirt ended. And this is my non-fancy way of figuring out if this was going to fit. First of all, I kind of knew right away something was off. So here's what I did. So I took my skirt piece and I laid them together and I overlapped the seam allowance here 5/8 inch and put them together just like they would be sewn. And then I took my bodice piece, the front bodice piece, and I looked at my center front line. And I just kind of walked the pattern to get a quick gauge, is this going to work or not? Now you can see I've already added some on because I have to grade from a much smaller size bust to pretty much the largest size of the pattern envelope for my waist. So I just kind of walked the pattern. I lined it up on this end, and I kind of took my hand and just turned it. Saw, okay, maybe we're going to line up, and then I'm like, wait a minute. Here is my center front seam, and you can see the skirt is way larger. And so I started looking a little more closely at the pattern, and that's when I figured out, wow, this really does not match because of that drop seam. So I took a little guess. I put on some extra paper, and I began to just start guessing about how much that pattern difference was. And I guessed 3 inches. And I'm happy to say I think that was the correct guess. So I took my ruler, I added in 3 inches at the top of each skirt portion. I kept the seam allowance overlapped, and then I double checked it again. So I took my front pattern piece here, lined up the edge, just kind of turned it and walked it. Obviously this is not perfection, but as you can see when you turn and walk it, that center front line is meeting that center front of the skirt. And that is what I wanted to accomplish, so that that skirt line, that seam line that would be there would actually be at my natural waist, not at the drop waist, so that it would be more like the inspiration pattern. So if you choose to do this pattern, you're going to want to cut out from your pieces 2 of your side front and side back, or I'm sorry, 4 of your side front and side back, which is piece 17, because we want to do that longer skirt. We don't want the pieces that go with view A, even though that is where your pocket piece comes from. We don't want to do that. We want this skirt, and we're just going to add that pocket in ourselves. So you're going to cut out the skirt pieces for this one from this pattern. So it's number 17. It's the skirt side front and side back for B and C. And you're going to cut out 4 of those. And it does call for a lining on that one. I have not decided yet if I'm going to line this or not. So if you're going to line it, you'll need 8 pieces. You'll need 4 in fabric and 4 in lining. Then you'll need piece number 16, which is the skirt front and back. That's the one that's cut on the fold and is the straight piece in the front, so there's no seam line running through the front of the skirt. So you cut 2 of those on the fold, 1 for the front, 1 for the back, and then 2 of those on the fold if you're choosing to line it. And then what you want to cut out is the pocket and the welt from view A. So here is the pocket piece for the pattern, which is number 4, and you're going to cut out 4 of those. And then here is the welt, and this one is calling for 2 of fabric and then 2 of interfacing. And when we get to this part in the sew along, I was a little intimidated about what this welt pocket was going to be like to put in. I have sewn welt pockets before. It's not my favorite just because it's a little bit finicky. Certainly not easy for a beginner, and getting that crisp edge is a little bit difficult. I was happy when I read this that it's a little bit more of, I guess, a faux welt, but it's going to basically just be folded in half on itself, stitched in, and then flipped over and stitched down on the sides into that center front seam. So I think that this will end up being much easier than a traditional welt pocket will be, and so I'm happy I chose that skirt pattern that has a simpler pocket. So you're going to want to go ahead and cut out all those pieces from your fabric, and you will have completed day 1 of the sew along, which is prep and cutting of your fabric and pattern. This is the piece that I originally cut incorrectly during my cutting session, so I'm going to go back and edit that in the cut sew along portion, and that is this part 16, which is a skirt front and back in the center. I forgot that we are adding a center back zip, and just like the other dress, this one does not call for a center back zip, so we needed to add to it. So I'm going to have to split my piece in half and then steal a little bit from my side seams here so that I have enough to put in my center back. But what you would want to do to avoid that is when you're laying this piece to cut your back only,
because your front you want on the fold, so there's no center front seam. But on your back, you're going to want to put that piece of paper in, kind of like what we did on our center back seam of our bodice, same concept. You'll want to tape a piece of paper on, draw out an additional 5/8 inch seam allowance or 1/2 inch, whatever you want to add in for your zipper, and add that seam allowance on, and then cut this knot on the fold so that you have 2 pieces. So again, when you're cutting out piece number 16, just remember that the one back section, the center back, needs to be in 2 pieces because you're adding that center back zip. So add your 5/8 inch seam allowance, tape on a piece of paper to add that extra seam allowance in, and then cut out that piece. Again, cut 2 of them so you have 1 on each side. Then when it's time to assemble our pattern, we'll just need to remember our center back piece versus our side piece. And to do that, the side has this notch in it. So this is the side we're going to be matching up to the back pieces. So
I hope you enjoyed day 1 of our sew along for the Carolina Herrera inspiration dress. We'll be back with day number 2 when we start sewing together our bodice. I'll see you then. Don't forget to like or subscribe so you can keep getting these updates. Bye!